So I've been wanting to do this video for quite a while now. I think the influences on modern day demonology is widely misunderstood by many. There's a certain viewpoint that says that the world is polarized between true good and true evil, whereas in fact we may see that one has spawned the other. And this can be seen very typically in religions such like Christianity. I mean, where would Christianity be without its one true God, its angels, its fallen angels and demons, and its Satan? But then there are other views that, although still accepting this concept of demonology, they don't see gods and demons as supernatural beings, but rather they see them more as various aspects of nature and as parts of the human psyche. And it's these two views that I want to compare and contrast in regards to demonology today. Now, to do so, I want to dig right back into the roots, the fundamentals, the foundations, the very beginnings of where this idea and concept of demonology first began. And then we'll move on to ancient Mesopotamia, where we really, truly start to see what we would now recognize as the concept of demons. We'll explore how the Judeo-Christian religion, or Judeo-Christian religion, incorporated demons into its philosophy. Then, of course, straight into the medieval, where demonology, and perhaps demonology as we now see it and understand it today, really took form and shape, and it reached its peak. And once we had these good solid foundations of the evolution of demonology understood, then we can move on to comparing and contrasting the two specific theories. The one theory supporting supernatural beings and the concept of demons as actual living spiritual entities, and the concept of demons being a part of the natural world and a part of the human psyche. So grab yourself a handful of biscuits and a nice cup of tea, and then we'll begin. So let's start right back in the Paleolithic and the Old Stone Age. And this is about as far back as we can go, and it's clear that even right back then, man always struggled to understand his environment. There was the constant fear of hunger and death and many other unpleasant things. There were many things he just simply didn't understand. And in order to make sense of things and maybe perhaps to make him feel like he had some more control, he saw the sun, the moon and the stars, and he thought, there must be something much bigger than us that controls all of this. And to help ensure his health and his well-being, he thought it might be handy to be able to have some kind of interaction with these great spirits and beings. And thus was formed the first roots of the beginnings of all religions, and shamanism was born. As we moved down through the ages, the cultures became more sophisticated, but the ideas of the gods of nature and the spirits that roamed the earth remained intact. And we find ourselves in the ancient land of Mesopotamia, the land between the two rivers and the cradle of civilization. And here we find the Sumerian culture, which emerged around the time of 4,500 BCE. Now the Sumerians were polytheists with many gods and goddesses, and at the highest tier were the god or the gods, and some people call him Anu, the sky god, Enki, and Enlil. Enlil, the god of the air, the wind and the storms, and Enki, the god of the water, the god of wisdom, and the god of creation. And we should also mention the goddess Inanna, the goddess of love, fertility, and war. And it was these gods that formed the very foundations of the beliefs of the Akkadians, the Babylonians, and the Assyrians. The Sumerian creation myth tells us that the gods shaped the world from chaos, along with stories of divine rebellion and punishment, which later came to influence the narratives about fallen angels and demons. Hidden deep beneath the Sumerian pantheon were the demons of the Galar, the demons that came to drag the souls down to the underworld, and also the belief in the Utuku, the malevolent spirits of the dead. Now, a demon at this point in time could be described as a spirit that is not of divine influence, but one that is more bound earthly, and not necessarily even a malevolent spirit, but they could also be a protectorate spirit too. One such spirit you may be familiar with that stems from Sumerian mythology is that of the demon Pazuzu, the spirit that was carried on the backs of the locust wing, and is probably most notably known today for his starring role in that epic film, The Exorcist Version 2. But in Sumerian mythology, Pazuzu wasn't a malevolent demon. He was a protectorate demon. He was the demon that came to protect women during childbirth and battled the dreaded Lamashtu, the evil demon that preyed on pregnant women and came to take away the infants. Now, the Sumerian pantheon and demons were not only a predecessor to the Akkadians, the Assyrians, and the Babylonians, but they also greatly influenced the beliefs of Judaism too. Now, this primarily occurred during the Babylonian exile of the Jewish people in the 6th century BCE. Now, although the Judeans and Israelites had their stories that dated right back to the 10th century BCE, it's generally understood that the Old Testament of the Bible, as we know it today, was constructed during this Babylonian exile. It was at this point in time where the J-texts of the Judeans and the E-texts of the Israelites were first compiled to form the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. And if we look with a discerning eye, we can see quite clearly those influences seeping in from the beliefs of the Babylonians and hence Sumeria into the Hebrew scripts. For instance, there are shared mythological scripts such as the creation story and the flood stories, the Great Deluge, which is told to us from the Mesopotamian side in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which echoes another flood story, one agreed with its own narrative, told to us in Genesis as the story of Noah. And then there's the story of Lilith, the nocturnal demon who preyed on women and children, very much like the Sumerian Lamashtu. Most telling of all the concept of divine hierarchies with gods and subordinate demons versus God and his angels and his fallen angels. This idea of divine subordinate beings influenced greatly the Jewish understanding of the hierarchies of demons and angels as lesser beings under a supreme God. And we learn more about the demons of Jewish mythology in the Book of Enoch, an apocryphal text that describes the fallen angels and the Watchers who were sent down to earth to corrupt all humanity. And I'll read something for you now that can say it much more clearly than I can in regards to the influence of Samaria and Mesopotamia on the Abrahamic faiths. And it says, the Mesopotamian worldview deeply influenced Judaism by introducing cosmological frameworks, narratives of chaos and order, and the concept of supernatural beings, while Jewish monotheism diverged from the polytheistic pantheon of Mesopotamia. Many symbolic and mythological elements persisted, shaping Jewish demonology and later Christian traditions. This continuity demonstrates the enduring legacy of the Mesopotamian religion in shaping the Abrahamic faiths. Now, coming to the Christians, and the Christians further developed this idea of demonology into a more expansive and structured hierarchy, where demons became central players in this struggle, this cosmic struggle between the powers of good and evil, and became increasingly tied to Satan, who is now seen as the leader of a group of rebellious angels who formed an army to fight against God and humanity. And it was Christianity that introduced us to the hierarchy and the nature of demons. It told us of the origins of the demons, and it told us how these demons were cast out of heaven along with Satan after their rebellion. We're told they became the tempters of humanity, the instigators of sin, and the possessors of human bodies, with Satan at the top, supported by demons of various ranks and powers. This leads us on to the next evolutionary phase of demonology, that of the medieval, with many grimoires springing up of supposedly ancient and hidden knowledge. And these grimoires further defined the hierarchies of the demons. And they told us of hidden knowledge, of how one may subdue these demons and work with them to get them to do our bidding. And I'll put a list of them right up on the screen here, along with their origin, their purpose, and their significance. And it's these grimoires that form the very foundation of what we think of as demonology today. And for the most part, they all focus on the art of summoning and commanding demons to perform a certain purpose. And so this is pretty much where we are in terms of demonology today. It hasn't changed a lot since the medieval and the times and work of John Dee and Edward Kelly right up to the works of Aleister Crowley, although Crowley did recognise a few things, and we'll get to that a bit later. But there is another perspective of demonology that comes from not the religions and spirituality of the Middle East, but comes from the beliefs of the Central Europeans, with the roots of the belief system going right back there to the Proto-Indo-Europeans. And this is a belief system that held true to the ideas of nature at the core of everything. An animistic belief system that formed the foundations and core of the Germanic and Celtic people. They didn't see things through the idea of a true good and evil, but rather a reflection of nature. And nature, as everyone knows, is a balancing force. It is neither true good nor true evil, but a spectrum of all things in between. Now, I suppose there were still some supernatural elements in all of this, but that's only because they didn't understand nature the way that we do today. And so that brings us on to the philosophical thought of the Greeks and the mechanical minds of the Romans, both of which also had their roots back with the Proto-Indo-Europeans. Now, it was the Greek philosophers that systematically started to look at these ideas of the supernatural and began looking for answers that were more rational. And it was the philosophical observations and rationalism of the Greeks combined later with the pragmatism of the Romans that formed a more rational and applied approach to spirituality, still holding nature at its core, but guided in accordance with the laws of science. And this is one that we now call scientific naturalism. And so in a nutshell, scientific naturalism is a modern view of spirituality that sees nature as the creative and balancing force of all things, and science tells us what we know of its workings. Now, that's not to say that science knows everything. It just means there's a science behind everything, and it's accepted that there are still many things that science has yet to answer. So back to the question of demonology. And how does the scientific naturalist view this concept of demonology? Do they even, or do demons even exist in this view? Now, there's no doubt that certain forces do exist, but the strictly scientific speaking people would say that these issues, these problems, these things that you may call demons are psychological, that stem from imbalances of the mind, and some could even be caused by physical defects within the brain itself. But of course there are other possibilities now. Science is quite forward in saying and telling us that it doesn't understand absolutely everything. And there are quite a few things that science has theories on, but doesn't have proof of, which can lead to some very interesting thoughts in this regard. Now, we live in this world that we perceive through our five senses, and it's these five senses that gives us our idea of reality. And it is our reality, but the question is whether our reality is everything. Are we aware of everything there possibly is in existence? Quantum mechanics is just peeking into this world, and what it finds is a very strange vision of reality, one that's startling and defies our expectations. There are those theories of the multiverse, multiple planes of existence, and then there's time itself. We see it as a linear progression, but is it truly linear? Perhaps it's possible that all events happen at once, and it's just our progression through life and our vision of reality that makes time a linear concept. So is it possible then, and many people think it is, that there are many planes of existence, many different worlds, many different forms of life interacting in this one great cosmic soup? Could it be that these worlds should never interact? They're separated by dimensions that, by normal means, should not be able to be crossed. But sometimes worlds collide and portals open and dimensions crossed. Can there then lie a gateway deep within the mind where borders are crossed and demons come to be? So there we have it then. Some contrasting views on the subject of demonology. Now, I'm not here to tell you what to think. You make up your own minds, and I'll be interested to hear your opinions. So with that, I hope you've all enjoyed today's conversation. And if you have, then don't forget the old thumbs up. And subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And with that, I'll see you again very soon on the next one.